Welcome back to the shop. It's finally the day we're going to get to tuning on this car, but I've got a couple of things to fix first. If you recall from the last video, I replaced a bunch of gaskets around the turbo gasket itself, as well as the wastegate down there. And in the previous video, I did mention that I did hear a slight exhaust leak. With the car running and everything nice and hot, I cannot feel anything if I hold my hand around any of these flanges. So I want to show you guys a way to check for exhaust leaks. I saw this in a different video on YouTube and it works really well. So this might look janky and strange, but it actually works really well. What I did is I took my shop vac and I connected the hose to the blower side or the outlet side of the motor, and I shoved that piece of hose right into the tailpipe there, and then used some painter's tape just to create a temporary seal. What this allows me to do is run the shop vac, and then I'll be able to pressurize the exhaust system with the car off. So I'm just blowing regular old air backwards into the exhaust system, and then I can actually check for leaks. So I'm not sure how well this will come through on camera, but now with the shop vac running, I can reach around all of these joints right here, and I can search for anything that might be leaking. I don't feel anything around the turbo or around the wastegate down here, but I do feel a leak underneath the exhaust manifold gasket right there. By blowing air backwards in the exhaust, I can feel any air escaping past a flange or a gasket. And of course, as is tradition with this car, now the exhaust manifold gasket is blown out. I can feel it right under the runner or the port for cylinder number 1. It's blown out and it's just pissing air right past there. So before we do anything else, guess what? This entire thing has to come off of here. I have a new gasket on order. I'm going to try to get this work done ahead of time so that we can get this back together and get to tuning. So the turbo is disconnected, the downpipe is disconnected, and underneath there, probably can't see, underneath there, the wastegate is actually unbolted and it's just kind of dangling there. So I'm going to go after the exhaust manifold studs or nuts right now, and then hopefully I can get enough room to pull this off to the side to get that gasket out of there. Looks like this thing does have to move like 3/4 of an inch this way, and we should barely have enough room for that. I'm gonna have to finagle a whole bunch of other stuff out of the way, but yeah, I'll get to that, pick up when we're done. Just in case you're curious, this is the picture of the wastegate gasket that came out of it right there. All delaminated, coming apart, not doing gasket things. All right, there it is, right there. Now, let's see if we look closely at this. Oh yeah, okay. So, let's see if I get out of frame here. There we go. So you can probably see right here, the center material, whatever that is missing from there. You might be able to see light through there. So that's gone. This one is almost gone right here. You can probably see the light behind it there. Yep, you can see straight through it. And the other two ports right here and over here, yeah, they are completely burnt out. Even though it was only one port that I was hearing when I was plugged in with the shop vac, this thing was gonna fail soon. Anyway, I have a new one on order. It's a Cometic. It's a multi-layer steel exhaust manifold gasket, and I do think that that's gonna work a little bit better. And these one-piece stainless steel gaskets seem to work really well for this particular setup. And I think because they're sort of like a crush fit, they don't loosen up, at least so far. A lot better probably than this. This is a nice flexible gasket, you know, it's multi-layered and stuff. You can see it's actually blown out here too. Wow. So these might work for a while, but they're cheap and they don't last. So my new one's on order. It'll be here in a couple days. We'll pick up then. So in case you're wondering, here's what it looks like with everything disconnected. The turbo is kind of just hanging off to the side. Everything's kind of piled in here, but there is actually enough room. If you have a top mount setup like this, you can take the turbo off, the downpipe out of the way, and the wastegate, if you loosen it up, there's enough room to move that turbo manifold over enough to get it off of those studs. One other thing I think I'm gonna fix while I have all this apart. So here is the wastegate and the dump tube. I determined after some guess and check that this pipe was actually rubbing against the steering box. Any of you guys have ever turboed a 510, right? That's packing a lot of stuff into a small bag, if you will. I think I found the place where it's rubbing right here. While I have this out of the car, I'm gonna dent that pipe in just a little bit with a hammer, just so that hopefully when I put this all back in there, we don't have any more touching in the steering box, and then that really annoying vibration at 3,000 RPM will be pretty much gone for good. I'm pretty much an expert blacksmith, so a couple of precision whacks with my bigger ball peen hammer, and this is officially adjusted perfectly. So, shouldn't have to worry about this thing rubbing against the steering box anymore. We'll find out though, I'm sure. Now is the waiting game for parts, just like every time. Gasket will be here soon. We'll slam this back together in like 5 minutes, and then we're gonna get back to tuning. Out here again, I've got parts. This actually came in really fast. I ordered this from, I think, Z1 Motorsports. Yeah, they shipped this in like 2 days. Really happy with it. So this is the manifold gasket I need. As you can see, got everything all loosey-goosey disconnected here. Hey, look at that. KA24DET sticker. Nice. Thanks, guys. Pretty cool. You order a $20 gasket, you get one of these. Not too bad. This is KA24DET gasket. Any of you guys that have used these before, you probably understand this. It's a multi-layer steel. My goal here is that hopefully this will not blow out. Obviously, it shouldn't, I hope. There is a specific way that these are supposed to be installed. This is a multi-layer gasket, and it's held together with like a brass rivet right here. There's actually 2 of them. And because these are thick right here, right, they protrude beyond the thickness of the gasket, they cannot be captured between the manifold and the head. So you have to be kind of careful with the way you install these, and they give you basic instruction set here on how to install it. I'm gonna get this put on there, and we'll get to tightening everything back down. All right, before we go any further, need to put this guy on here. There, that's better. There we go. Eventually this whole thing will be covered. So here it is. Once again, everything all bolted up nice and tight. The new KA24DET gasket is in there. You can see the rivet right there. And the turbo, the downpipe, all bolted back down. New safety washers under those turbo bolts and new gaskets everywhere else. I'm gonna fire it up and we're gonna check for exhaust leaks and maybe take it for a rip. Okay, I'm gonna fire this thing up. If you guys hear anything, let me know. If you hear any exhaust leaks. All right, so far, other than, you can obviously hear that timing chain a little bit. I don't hear any exhaust leaks under the hood when I give it gas. Let's see if you guys can pick anything up. Sounds pretty good to me. All right, took it for a quick little ride up and down the road just to get it nice and hot. Gonna retorque every single bolt on the downpipe, the turbo, the manifold, everything I can. I can report that I hear no exhaust leaks under the hood. After I tighten all this stuff down, I'm gonna go over the install of the manual boost controller, which is very simple. And then finally, we are gonna get to go through the process of slowly turning the boost up on this car. Okay, so next thing I wanted to cover was the boost controller. And what I'm using is a TurboSmart manual boost controller. Let's see if I can get that guy in frame here. Okay, there it is. This is simply just a bleed valve, and this one's nice because it has detents, right? So you can turn it a finite number of clicks. So I'll explain kind of how I'm doing this. As soon as I would give this car any kind of throttle on Power Tour, I was hearing what I thought was detonation. So I kept on pulling timing out of the map, adding fuel, etc. And I drove this car very, very, very gently for all of Power Tour because we were just trying to survive. What I found out after bringing it home and testing it a little bit more, the way I had the wastegate plumbed, that was going to happen. I was actually hearing the wastegate cracking open. Long story short, I had the wastegate plumbed in such a way that if we made any boost at all, it would open and limit our boost to be as little as possible. And the reason for that is because I have a boost reference line run right from the intake manifold to the underside of the wastegate, or the bottom of the wastegate diaphragm. When you run straight boost pressure or boost reference to the bottom of the wastegate, effectively you are halving the spring pressure in the wastegate. So for example, if you have a 10-pound spring, you are going to get maximum of 5 pounds of boost, because 5 pounds of boost pressure is actually going to be pushing against that spring and helping it to open early. When I installed the manual boost controller, what I'm doing there is I'm installing that valve in the line to the wastegate. And then based on how tight or loose that valve is set, it's going to bleed off a certain amount of pressure so that the amount of boost pressure helping the wastegate to open is lowered. Effectively what this does is it gives you variable boost control, but it is kind of a set it once and forget it type thing. And basically you're setting the maximum. You're not going to set or change the behavior of the boost curve. You're not going to bring it on any sooner or whatever. That would be electronic boost control. In this case, I'm just setting the maximum. So that's how I've got the boost controller set up. I've got it plumbed in between the intake manifold and the line to the bottom of the wastegate. So bear in mind that I, off camera, already did a bunch of this dialing in, but let's say that you were installing a boost controller like this on your setup and you were wondering how to start. The idea here, if you look at this boost controller, it actually has indicators on it. And if you turn the dial clockwise, tightening it like that, if you turn the dial towards this direction, you're going to get more boost. If you turn it counterclockwise, you're going to get less boost, or loosening it. So my suggestion is to take this valve and run it all the way out in the clockwise direction until it stops. And that right there should allow the maximum amount of pressure to go through this valve and over to the wastegate, therefore opening it as soon as possible. So before I get too far ahead of myself, I think I forgot to explain the tune-up. I am not a tuner, so do not take any of my advice to heart, because I've only done this literally this time. I've never tuned a car from scratch. This is my first attempt. Here's what I did to get to where I am now with the tune-up. All right, so let's say that you put a turbo on your KA and you wired the thing up to run MicroSquirt or MegaSquirt. You're wondering how you can get started. Some people have tune files online, but there's a lot of differences in firmware and stuff, so it's not usually recommended to take someone else's tune file and dump it into your computer and then run it. You can use them as a reference, but you should still build your own, just because then it's built directly for your computer. The big things to remember, at least for the KA, there are sample maps that you can start with. The guys at MegaSquirt, MicroSquirt, they have sample timing and fuel maps for the different years of KAs available for download. So if you download that map and open it up, that's a good place to start. That will give you the baseline timing figures and the baseline fueling based on factory fuel injector size, etc., and fuel pressure, to at least get the thing to run in stock configuration. Now, this is the tune here that I have on the Datsun currently, and here are the couple of things that I found through research on forums and stuff that were really, really helpful. Okay, so from my research on the KA, from all the forum posts I've read and all the manuals on MicroSquirt and stuff, there are a couple of rules of thumb when you're tuning an engine for boost. Again, I will put in the disclaimer, I am not a tuner. This is the first time I've tried this. I'm giving this a shot. Do not take any of my advice as gospel. Please do your own research, and do not come after me if you blow your engine up, okay? A couple of things that I've heard from different tuners. The guy who tuned my Oldsmobile taught me a whole bunch of stuff, and other people I've met in the car industry. You always retard timing under boost, and the amount of timing retard is kind of specific to the engine that you're tuning, how much boost pressure you're running, etc. But in the case of the KA24DE, the suggested timing retard is between 1/2 and 3/4 of a degree per pound of boost. You will retard the timing by between 1/2 and 3/4 of a degree, according to forum posts on the KA. Sometimes people will go a whole degree, but that seems to be a little aggressive or a little too much timing retard. The next thing that you need to know that's very important is your AFR target. The MicroSquirt has a feature called Auto Tune, where it will actually read the value coming from the wideband, and then it will look at the fuel table and it will look at the target air-fuel ratio for that RPM and that manifold absolute pressure. And if it's not seeing what it needs to from the sensor, it will automatically adjust the fuel cell to either go richer or leaner to try to hit that target within reason. That's essentially how the MicroSquirt does a lot of your tuning for you, and it's really, really nice. It saves you a bunch of time, especially for part throttle cruise and stuff. Next guideline that I've heard, anything wide open throttle, naturally aspirated, usually 12.5 to 1 AFR is pretty good for making horsepower in a naturally aspirated setup. So in a boosted setup, anything up and around 100 kPa atmospheric pressure, which means no vacuum or wide open throttle, can be right around 12.5 to 1. However, as soon as you go above that, you need to start richening the mixture as you add more boost. Big two things. Number one, you need to retard timing and boost. The amount of timing retard is specific to the engine you're using. Number two, you need to add fuel as you go up in boost, targeting about 12.5 to 1 at wide open throttle, and then I would say, I don't know, maybe 5 pounds of boost, or 0 to 5 pounds of boost, you can be at like maybe a 12.0, and then 5 pounds and higher, you can be at an 11.5. And then some people, depending on how the engine is tuned and the timing, you can run 11.5 a little bit higher, but then I would say what, anything over 10 pounds, 11 pounds maybe, you'd want to be at like an 11.0. Now, these might be richer figures than some people would suggest, and if you have a reason why, please comment down below. But these are just kind of starting points, right? If you have access to a dyno, you could dial this in a lot better, but I'll kind of show you the AFR targets that I have set up in the Datsun, kind of explain a little bit more. Under fuel settings, if you go to AFR table here, so one thing that you might notice, and I actually need to change this, is the RPM limit on my AFR table. I actually adjusted my timing table and my fuel table. So here, if we look at the ignition table 1, you notice my ignition table 1 runs all the way out to 7,200 RPM, and my AFR table only runs to 6,000. So the engine is going to target the same AFR at 66 or above 6,000. So 6,600 and 7,200, it's going to be the same AFR. So I know that I need to adjust that. Let's not get hung up on that though. For AFR table, if you look at this right here, down in vacuum, or 30 kPa, and all in the part throttle cruise area, we are running between a 14.5 and a 14.0 to 1 air fuel ratio. Now, as we start to get up near the 100 kPa, so here at like 87, and then at 100 kPa, right, we richen the mixture up. So at 87 kPa, I'm at 13.5, and then 100 kPa, I'm at 12.5, that magical 12.5 number. Now, as the boost increases, I think I have mine set up here, yeah, for 200 kPa, but my maximum pressure I think is going to be 175. So I have mine set to go 11.5 to 1 out to 10 pounds of boost. Now, whether that's enough or not, whether that's too rich or too lean, this is sort of what I'm operating on. So when I get up to 120 kPa, which is like 3 pounds of boost, I'm at an 11.8 to 1. When I'm at 145 kPa, that's about 6.5 pounds boost, I'm at 11.5 to 1, and I run 11.5 to 1 all the way to 10 pounds, 10 or 11 pounds. The reason this is significant, using this table, MicroSquirt will look at what RPM the engine's at, what cylinder load or kPa is in the manifold, and then determine, am I hitting 11.8 to 1 or am I rich or lean? And depending on how far off you are, the computer will actually adjust the fuel in that particular cell to try to hit this ratio. That's the AFR target table. That's what the computer's going to use to make corrections. And because I was doing auto tuning on MicroSquirt, the readout from that oxygen sensor is incredibly important. That's why when the gaskets were blown out in this thing last week and the week before, I wasn't doing any tuning on it because the gaskets being blown out is an exhaust leak before the sensor, and that throws the reading off. So then the computer would be adjusting for a condition that is incorrect, and you could end up with way too little fuel or way too much fuel, and you could blow stuff up. So now that we've covered kind of the basics of what your AFR table needs to be, I'm not going to touch on the fuel settings because every single tune on every single car is going to be different depending on what injectors you use and what fuel pressure you're running. The next most important thing is the timing. Okay, I'm going to attempt to explain the timing on this car without going into way too much detail and making this video super boring. But essentially, here's what I did. I took the timing table, the factory KA timing table, and I scaled the Y-axis and the X-axis here to hit the RPM I want to hit, and the boost pressure a little bit above the boost pressure I want to hit over here. So then MicroSquirt will actually interpolate all those values and make it essentially match the factory timing table, but just readjust the X and Y scales. So from there, what I did to start off was every cell, every row above 100 kPa, I retarded the timing. And how I did that was I looked right here, and in this cell, or this row particularly, at 115 kPa, that's equivalent to about 2.2 pounds of boost. So as a guideline, between 1/2 and 3/4 of a degree of retard for each pound of boost, I took this entire row right here and I highlighted it and I subtracted, let's call it 1 degree of timing. So 1 degree of timing for 2 pounds of boost. So at the next row, 130 kPa, that's equivalent to about 4.3 pounds of boost. So again, another 2 PSI. I selected this entire row all the way across right here, and I subtracted 2 degrees of timing from that entire row. Here at 145 kPa, we're at about 6.5 PSI, so another 2 pounds. So I selected this entire row. I went all the way to the right and I subtracted 3 degrees of timing, and so on and so forth, all the way up to my maximum boost pressure. So what that essentially did is it set up the timing table to be very conservative anywhere above boost. Now, depending on how nervous you are, you could subtract more timing as you go, but that's kind of where I started. So once I had my timing table roughly dialed in by subtracting a certain amount of timing, as I went up in boost, I then searched through the forums for KA turbo setups, and I found 2 different examples of guys making power with KAs. So what I did is I looked back and forth between these 2 maps, and I looked at their RPM values, their manifold pressure, and what their timing value was, and I kind of used those values as references to my own timing table right here. So what I ended up with was sort of an amalgamation of retarding timing per pound of boost going up on the factory map, and then also comparing those values to known good values I found from the forums. Okay, so without taking too much more time to sit here and gab at you, that is kind of the steps I took to get to where I am right now. A couple other things I did in the computer is I put a boost safety at 12 pounds. So if at any time the car ever makes 12 pounds, it cuts the fuel for a few seconds to prevent the engine from blowing itself up. I've got the boost controller in there. It is turned all the way down. We're gonna hook the computer up to the car and we're gonna take it for a drive, and I'm gonna show you guys the process I go through to get the boost set right where I want it. All right, so I'm in the car, it's running. I've got my laptop hooked up, and remember I turned the wastegate all the way down, or the boost controller all the way down. So I'll show you what I was hearing on Power Tour. So if I drive the car normally, you can't hear anything crazy, right? But if I'm in, any gear, and I give it any amount of throttle, you hear something like that. Do that one more time. That's what I was hearing on Power Tour the entire time. Anytime I gave this thing any kind of throttle, and I thought that it was starting to detonate. In actuality, what was happening is the turbo was starting to spool, and it was opening the wastegate as early as possible. So, I'll get into a nice stretch of road here. We'll see what boost pressure we're hitting right now. There was 7 pounds of boost. It's a little bit more than I wanted to make the first try. That's what we saw. So I'm going to pull over. We're going to turn that boost controller up a couple clicks, then run it again. Alright, so I turned the boost controller up 6 clicks. Now normally, if you hadn't done this before, you do like, a click or 2 at a time to really see what kind of boost pressure you're going to get. I'm going to start with 6. I'm thinking that's going to put us at like 8-9 pounds. actual pressure out of it. I think we saw 7.5 pounds. So I'm wondering if each click on that boost controller is 1/10 of a pound. I'm not sure. I'm gonna pull over and turn it up a little more. Okay, I gave it another 8 clicks. So if these are 1/10 of a pound, we should be at a little over 8 pounds this time. Okay, that's a little better. I think we saw something like 8.4. All right, I'm gonna pull over again, turn it up, see what it makes now. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually letting the MicroSquirt auto tune a little bit. Essentially what it's doing is it's reading the sensor information from the wideband, and it's looking at my AFR target table, and then it's adjusting the fuel in each cell to hopefully match and get to the AFR we're looking for. So it's actually adjusting on the fly. This thing out on the road, so it's not like the tune is really far off. I mean, maybe it is, but it seems to be running plenty safely. 10 pounds of boost maximum and really conservative timing up top, as well as plenty of fuel, so it could actually stand to take more fuel out. So I should mention this, when I was first tuning this car, first starting this process, I definitely was very, very careful as I slowly started to creep up on power. So I was watching my air-fuel ratio gauge like a hawk, and I was also watching timing and listening very closely for any detonation. I was actually overcautious on power tour, thinking detonation was just wastegate. Yeah, this process, I'm sure a lot of people would do this differently. I'm sure I'll get flamed in the comments, but what I did a lot was slowly bring the power up, and if I heard anything or if the car did anything weird, I'd let off, and then I'd make adjustments. So it's kind of what we're doing now. Auto tune is a great feature. It makes a bunch of these changes while you're driving, so you don't have to be looking at the computer the whole time. So that's kind of where we're at now. Letting this thing tune up just a little bit, zip it around a little, and then once we get the fuel dialed in to where it runs pretty much the way we want it to, then we'll start maybe dialing timing in a little more. Man, this turbo spools fast. I thought that this turbo would be a little bit big, but it spools really quick. So off camera, 4th gear, I just hit boost cut. Man, oh man, is that violent. Holy cow. So I might have to turn that boost controller down like 1 click just so that I don't hit boost cut in a higher gear. I'll be honest, you guys, this car is so nice to drive. I can't even tell you. I tightened up the coilovers on both sides because the shock nuts, or the gland nuts holding the shocks in the housing were loose. So there's no more clunking in the front end. And with new exhaust gaskets under the hood, the thing is nice and quiet with the exhaust all the way to the back of the car. The difference inside the car is so noticeable. I can't really even explain it. The rubber bushings and the motor mounts probably made the biggest difference. And it's making power. It sounds good. After getting the tune dialed in, I was pretty comfortable with the way the car was running. We hit the local highways to get some sick rolling shots. Man, is this thing a freaking blast. Finally got the Datsun to where it's making boost and it's super fun to drive. All of the fixes with the exhaust gaskets and the motor mounts have made the car perfect. It's a very enjoyable experience inside the car driving down the road. We are not done with the Datsun, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think we should do next. Where should we go with this car? Post your ideas and comments down below. I'd love to know what you guys think and where we should take this thing. I'd like to also take this time to thank some of my longtime subscribers and people who consistently comment on videos. You guys have been a huge part of how I stay motivated to build this car and to keep going, especially when everything breaks, when I find things that continuously fail. Your support and encouragement has meant a lot to me. I do read all the comments and they do mean something to me. I try to ignore the negative ones, but that's kind of a part of YouTube. To my subscribers, both new and old, I appreciate every single one of you. I'm having a blast making these videos, building these cars, and sharing them with you. If you like what you're seeing here and you're not subscribed, consider hitting that button. If you guys are interested in merch, the link to the merch store is in the description below. And as always, if you have any questions with what I'm doing on this car or how I did something, parts that I used, anything like that, feel free to drop a comment down below. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been a ton of fun, and I'll catch you in the next one.